Hey everyone, my name is Nathan and welcome back to Maple Street. I started Alfred Hitchcock month this year with a video focusing on 9 performances from his movies that I think should have deserved at least a nomination for an acting performance at the Oscars. And I'm closing out the year by ranking the 9 performances that actually did receive Oscar nominations. Yes, in all of Alfred Hitchcock's movies, only 9 performances received an Academy Award for an acting performance. And of those 9, only one actually won the Oscar, but we'll get to that more later. Coming in at number 9, I have Ethel Barrymore for The Paradine Case. I actually really like her performance here. I just think it's sort of a random performance to nominate for an Oscar. She was nominated in a supporting category, and she does fine whenever she's on screen. In fact, there are some moments where even her facial reactions are enough to warrant an Oscar nomination. My conflict, though, is that she has very little screen time. Like, you're really banking on those few moments she does have to justify the nomination to begin with. And if she had more screen time, I think she would have ranked higher too. In fact, of this whole list, I think she has the least amount of screen time. But the scenes that she does have, I think she does a great job in. Number 8, I have Michael Chekhov from Spellbound. He was also nominated in the supporting category. Michael Chekhov plays a doctor who is crucial in this movie to helping both Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck's character. Well, mostly Gregory Peck's character, but he has a relationship with Ingrid Bergman. And his role is essentially to help find answers for Gregory Peck as to the questions he's having about himself. So with the limited screen time he has, he does a good job. But similar to Ethel Barrymore, I don't think there was anything mind-blowing about his performance. Coming in at number 7, I have Laurence Olivier for Rebecca. This is the only actor in a leading role nomination that was ever received in Alfred Hitchcock's filmography. And I asked myself before ranking him this low, Nathan, are you only ranking him so low because you're not a fan of Mr. De Winter's character in the movie? And I thought about it, and although yes, that is particularly true, my biggest problem with his performance is that I feel like anyone could have done it. And on top of that, I think that others could have done better with it too. There are certain scenes in Rebecca that I think are crucial for having more emotion, especially in the way that lines are delivered and understanding the character's past, especially Mr. De Winter's past and his relationship with the late Rebecca. And Laurence Olivier's delivery of the lines, it doesn't completely convince me. I think that there could have been better actors for this role that would be more successful in conveying the emotions that he is feeling and the conflict that he is dealing with. I don't think that Laurence Olivier does a bad job. I just think that it could have been much better. At number 6, I have Albert Bassermann from Foreign Correspondent. This was for a supporting role. The majority of his role is acting drugged up and confused about where he is and unsure of what's happening, but there's a role to be played, and I think he did a good job at convincing the audience that he actually was drugged up, that he was unaware of his surroundings. Sometimes a performance is that simple, where they had one task, they accomplished the task, therefore, it's a great performance. At number 5, I have Joan Fontaine for Suspicion. This is the only nominated performance from Alfred Hitchcock's filmography that actually went on to win the Oscar. And as you can already tell from my ranking it at number 5, I think her performance in Rebecca is better, but more on that a little later. I don't really have anything bad to say about this performance. At this point in the list, she's only ranked at number 5 because I like 4 performances more. The story that she's given and the situation her character is placed in, she does a good job at acting uncertain and wanting to stay with Cary Grant's character regardless of the red flags that keep popping up. If you're a fan of melodramatic acting, then she's incredible. Sometimes it does get a little old to me and it's a little too much where it takes me out of the movie, but I also don't want to falter at that because I think it's kind of a strength and a weakness, if that makes sense. Sometimes her melodrama can really carry a scene, whereas other times it can kind of ruin a scene. Number 4, I have Claude Rains from Notorious. Claude Rains does a great job in the supporting role of Notorious. I'm a fan of the actor in general, and so the fact that he was nominated for this makes me so happy to see, but I think he deserves it too. He goes from this very professional and suave businessman, let's say, and as the film progresses, you see a more vulnerable side of him, especially as he's realizing that he's being played and that he's not as maybe smart as he originally thought he was. I like seeing the character become weaker as the film progresses. But then on top of that too, there are strengths that come out of nowhere, where even though he's vulnerable, he still has some fight in him. And so for my money, I think it's a great supporting performance. Coming in at number 3, we have probably the most iconic supporting performance of this whole list, and that is Janet Leigh in Psycho. Janet Leigh does such a great job in this role, and I think she's especially good in some of the scenes that aren't noted as often. The shower scene is everyone's go-to, but I think we get a lot of great acting from her, even when she's just driving and you're listening to the voiceover of her thinking about the money that she stole and unsure of whether or not she should return it or continue on. It's just good acting to me, even though it's just her making faces at the camera. I think it works really well. And then on top of that, her interactions with Norman Bates are also very well done. Her character is tired but also scared from running, and I think that she portrays that very well. Then of course I'd be remiss not to mention the shower scene. This scene could have been really cheesy and really dumb, and Janet Leigh's acting makes it so that it is not. So I'm very grateful for her in that sense. Although we don't have too much time with her, I mean, it is a supporting performance after all, I do think that the movie would be different and worse. So I'm very grateful that we have her and that she got nominated. Alright, if you're a fan of Alfred Hitchcock Oscar nominations, you know that the 2 nominees remaining are both from Rebecca. But which one's my number 2? Which one's my number 1? Well, I'll tell ya. Number 2 goes to Joan Fontaine for Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role. I like this performance more than Suspicion because I think she has more to work with. In Suspicion, really her character's main problem is that she's conflicted of whether or not to trust her husband. Whereas with Rebecca, she has a lot more conflict to deal with, including going from a poor life, living as a secretary, to suddenly living a royal life, basically. Not only that, but adjusting to living in a new environment, a new town, but also a new mansion, and having servants, which she has never had before. And then she's also replacing Rebecca, the previous wife of Mr. De Winter, who was such a big authority at Manderley. And so she's trying to fill the shoes of Rebecca while also being her own unique signature self. And in addition to all of that, she has Mrs. Danvers breathing down her neck, watching her every move. And so she's just given a lot more to work with as Mrs. De Winter, or as the new Mrs. De Winter, than she was in Suspicion. And for that, I think that this is a better performance. At least I like the performance more. And also, I think she should have won for this opposed to winning for Suspicion. I haven't looked at the Oscars of 1941 and who actually won, and so that's me saying this without knowing who won. And at number 1, I have Judith Anderson for her supporting performance in Rebecca playing Mrs. Danvers. I talked before about how overbearing Mrs. Danvers is and how she's always breathing down the new Mrs. De Winter's neck, and I think it's partially due to Judith Anderson's performance as Mrs. Danvers that makes Rebecca such an iconic and haunting movie. A lot of the movie, just being in the same room as Judith Anderson is enough to know that she is creepy and that she is a force to be reckoned with. You couldn't just throw any actress on the screen to play Mrs. Danvers and have that same result. You need someone who makes their presence known, and I think Judith Anderson does a very good job at that without even speaking a line. And so for that, of the Oscar-nominated performances from Alfred Hitchcock's filmography, I'm giving the title of my favorite to Judith Anderson as Mrs. Danvers for Rebecca. That was a really long line. I would love to hear your ranking below, especially because this isn't that much of a talked about subject. Like, this is my opinion, but for all I know, there could be this underground fan club for Michael Chekhov in Spellbound. Something for you to look forward to. August recently wrapped, and not only was I participating in Alfred Hitchcock Month, but I was also participating in TCM's Summer Under the Stars. And so I have a very exciting video coming up soon that has to do with that annual celebration. Thanks all for visiting Maple Street. Have a great day.